The Milkman Murders is arguably the most interesting comic I've had the chance to discuss yet on this channel, which is really saying something when you consider past reviews like Christopher Priest's Deathstroke run, Batman Adventures Volume 1, and The Violent. But the reason I'm saying this is because I know this will be a divisive book for people. Depending on your sensibilities, you'll either be enthralled with the story or stop reading with disgust in the first 10 pages. This is a damn disturbing horror comic, which gives us an opportunity to discuss the horror genre in comics and film and how they differ. Horror comics have a different set of tools to work with than film. It's arguably tougher to convey the genre in comics than film because of that. With film, you have much more in your arsenal to tell your story, notably sound and motion. These elements are paramount in organically creating tension for the medium. You can make simple establishing shots foreboding with the right score, or even build suspense of an upcoming conflict. You can even do stupid jump scares when it comes to motion, or even utilize subtle motions like grabbing a knife from a countertop. Something that would take a comic a couple of panels to pull off in a similar manner. When it comes to the horror genre, films do have that advantage, we can agree there. However, that doesn't mean comics don't have their own unique benefits. For starters, still images can spark the imagination, enabling talented artists to pull readers in with their skills alone. This cannot be understated. Due to the collaborative nature of comics, a good script needs a good artist to bring it to life. Even the best story out there can be hindered by a mismatched artist, and that's especially true when it comes to horror comics. Since comics don't have sound or motion to fall back on, it's up to the artist to create an atmosphere that we can get lost in as the tension builds, whether it's through a creepy environment, character, or object. Slow build tension more often than not works best in comics if you're trying to unnerve people. And unnerving the reader is ultimately the best thing a horror comic can strive for. If the writer and artist are able to create something that causes the reader to react to what's happening on a page of still images, then you're doing something right. The Milkman Murders more than achieves that goal. This is without a doubt one of the most unnerving comics I've ever read, and it doesn't accomplish that with zombies, werewolves, aliens, or even demons. It unnerved me through portraying the horrors of the suburban life, with some implied supernatural elements. The core of the story, however, is grounded with believable and unsettling characters. The suburban dream of the white picket fence, a husband or wife to come home to with 2 kids, has been a long-standing goal for most Americans for decades now. And that's the goal of the main character, Barbara. She's a housewife who pines for the perfect suburban life, like in the TV show she watches called Leave It to Mother. Unfortunately for her, she has nothing close to that life. Everyone in Barbara's family is an awful human being, and the story doesn't pull its punches in showing it. Her husband works the standard 9-to-5 job as the family's breadwinner. Only after work, he either gets high with his friends, or takes out his frustrations on Barbara through verbal or physical abuse. Believe it or not, the kids are somehow worse than their father. Ruthie, their daughter, sleeps around with her married high school gym teacher and plans to run away with him the first chance they get. Then there's Fletcher, Barbara's awkward son who sneaks out in the middle of the night killing stray dogs and cats, taking their pelts as trophies to their shed. There's not a single redeeming quality to any of Barbara's family. Yet we still care for her as she tries to hold them all together, even if we know deep down how pointless that is. She endures one awful day after another with her family till eventually Barbara reaches her breaking point after a tragic incident that I'm not going to spoil here. But I will say that it sets Barbara on a gruesome path as we watch a good person slowly unravel. This comic was written by Joe Casey, and this probably isn't the best Joe Casey comic to read first if you're looking to get a sense of his style, but it's still a damn good horror story from him. Especially when you know what his style is, it's even more impressive. I can certainly tell you that this is the least Joe Casey comic I've ever read, and hell, he even mentions that in his own revised introduction. I didn't know he had one of these in him. The reason why I'm saying that is that Joe Casey typically has 3 elements that you can find in most of his works that are barely in this story at all. First, he has a clear love of superheroes to where the majority of his modern works involve him deconstructing the superhero genre in one way or another. The Bounce, Sex, and Godland come to mind, but there are plenty of others out there. Then there's his pacing, which is usually very slow burn and character focused. And I'm not talking slow burn for 6-issue build then payoff for the trade type of slow burn. Casey prefers to set up and play with his ideas that don't fully pay off for several arcs minimum. And last, you have his tone, which is lately veered towards the psychedelic and Kirby Crackle era, which does tend to go well with his love of superheroes. Few of these elements are present in the Milkman Murders. This is a truncated story that moves through its plot with many character moments to be had, but it never forgets the space it has to tell the story, and it doesn't bog itself down with excess. There is a slight otherworldly element that does get introduced after Barbara's trauma, but it's low-key and in line with the book's bleak tone. There's a clear sense of dread from the opening pages that slowly build as we relate to Barbara's dream and are simultaneously disgusted by the rest of her family. The deliberate pacing of the first two issues pays off in the second half, when Barbara, post her mental break, confronts her family over their behavior, and this is where the book makes a clear turn into the unnerving. Each of the family members' vile behaviors has a payoff. Though I can't say much about spoiling, let's just say the intensity of the encounter was not at all what I was expecting. Reading this was like witnessing a slow-motion car wreck that I couldn't look away from. The devastation was too compelling even if I was legitimately unnerved from what I was reading. This isn't just Joe Casey's doing either. Casey does a great job of giving us a window into these characters, yes, but this comic wouldn't be half as effective without the work of the artist, Steve Parkhouse. Parkhouse has an incredible presentation to his storytelling, giving the story to you in a clear and efficient manner, though it is not a pretty book at all to look at, and it's not supposed to be, given how this is a comic about the underbelly of the suburban dream. His style is a perfect fit for that. Scenes with Fletcher skinning animals feel even more vile under his eye, and Barbara's punishment for him is especially gruesome. There are plenty of images in this book that I won't be forgetting anytime soon, and that's a mark of a great artist making the most of their medium. As a result, there were plenty of pages where I had to take a moment to digest what was happening in a particular scene or panel before continuing. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but this isn't the fun kind of horror. This is the horror that cuts right through the nerve and straight to the bone. Be aware of that going into this. It's certainly not for everyone given its genuinely disturbing content, but if you're a big fan of horror and you want something that's effective at disturbing the hell out of you with its story and artwork, then you'll be right at home here. The quality of the hardcover itself is once again excellent, which won't come as much of a surprise to longtime Image readers. It's a sturdy collection, and the paper quality is nice and crisp. It'll look great on your bookshelf, though it might not be the book you'd want to show off to people, but I'll leave that up to your judgment. Also, something happy to discuss for a moment. I finally have a chance to discuss another one of my favorite things with the medium of comics, and that's introductions. Some people aren't a big fan of them, but a great introduction can set the stage for the story you're about to experience. A bad one will spell out all the beats to you or drone on, but the introductions by Joe Casey, with both his original from the Dark Horse publication and the revised edition from the hardcover, are equally entertaining reads. And even Steve Parkhouse has an afterword at the end. Joe Casey is always fascinating to listen to in his interviews, and he's just as intriguing here with the introductions. His passion leaks from the page and excellently sets the stage for this twisted tale of his and Steve's. The hardcover retails for $14.99, which is incredibly reasonable for the quality of the content provided, though it is a bit of a brisk read, packing 4 issues of story plus extras like the introductions. It's still a bit of a risk for those on the fence with it, but at least it's not too pricey of a chance. Even though I know this will be divisive for some people, my experience was overwhelmingly positive. I could not stop reading this book. I went from cover to cover, only taking breaks in between issues to soak in what I just read. Horror can be entertaining, or it can be designed to disturb the living hell out of you, and this definitely did the latter. This was yet another underrated gem from Joe Casey, who also happens to be a criminally underrated comics writer in the industry. Seriously, more people should check out his stuff, and I'll gladly spotlight more of his works in the future. This has more than earned a full-price buy recommendation from me. And that wraps up this review. I do want to thank everyone for being patient with me and getting this review out. I wanted to get this out on Thursday, but a few things just kind of held it back with the script. It just wasn't quite right for me, and I didn't want to force it out, so thank you very much with your patience and understanding. And if you enjoyed this review, feel free to like and share it, and even leave a comment if you have anything to add. I'd be really curious to talk about this book, since I know this would be one that someone could just as easily tell me that they loved it in that messed up sort of way, or tell me that they were completely disgusted by it. And I think both are perfectly valid in this case. And also, tune in 2 weeks, and this time I'm going to get out on time, I promise, but we are going to be returning back to Marvel with all new Wolverine Volume 2. I'll see you then.